After my wife and youngest son died in a sudden car accident, I thought the funeral would be the most painful moment of my life. I was wrong. During the will reading, my daughter inherited everything: the company, the house, everything we had built together. I was left with a crumbling shack, and my wife's final message that made everyone believe I had destroyed our family. While I was still grieving, my daughter coldly said, "Pack your things and get out of my house." But when I finally reached that lonely place, I discovered a horrifying truth. Before we go any further, take a second to say hello in the comments. Where are you watching from tonight, your city or your country? I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And a quick note, some elements in this story have been creatively imagined to make the journey more engaging for everyone listening. I have buried friends. I have buried my parents. But nothing prepares you to stand between the graves of your wife and your youngest son, watching two mahogany caskets sink into Arizona desert sand, while 200 people refuse to meet your eyes. I stood at the edge of those graves, 62 years old, a man whose 34 years as an aerospace engineer had never prepared him for this. The October wind cut through my black suit as I stared at the polished wood holding everything I had loved. Catherine Brennan Sullivan had been 60 when the accident took her. My wife of 34 years, a woman whose silver-streaked auburn hair and sharp green eyes had masked the brilliant mind that transformed Sullivan Industries into a $90 million enterprise. Now she was a name on a headstone. Beside her, Michael, my youngest, 28 years old, with my methodical mind and his mother's quiet courage. He had worked as an IT security analyst at the family company. 3 weeks ago, he sent me a text I never answered. "Dad, I found something. We need to talk." Now I would never know what he found. Have you ever stood in a crowd of people who believe you are a monster, who will not look at you, will not acknowledge that your heart is shattering? 200 mourners surrounded those graves, and not one would meet my eyes. I caught whispers on the desert wind. They say he gambled it all away. Heard he lost millions. Poor Catherine, married to a man like that. Gambled. I have never placed a bet in my life. Yet here I stood, accused of something I did not do, mourning people I would have died to protect, while everyone treated me like a disease. The priest droned words about beloved members of this community. He had never met Catherine, never known Michael. His words were hollow, meaningless. I clutched the funeral program, feeling the sprig of silver sage pressed between the pages. Catherine's flower. Even that small comfort felt like an accusation now. Let me tell you something about grief. Real grief does not come at the funeral. It comes in the quiet moments after, when you reach for a phone to call someone who will never answer. But that day, I did not have the luxury of grief, because something else was happening. Something I could not yet see. Victoria stood across the graves from me. My eldest daughter, 38 years old, tall and angular in a designer black dress that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Her pale blue eyes surveyed the funeral with the detached calculation of someone watching chess pieces fall into place. Behind her lingered Marcus, my son-in-law of 12 years, 42, soft around the middle with the nervous energy of a man who had tied his fate to someone dangerous. He would not meet my eyes. He had not met them since the hospital. The mechanical whir of the lowering system filled the silence as both caskets began their descent. I watched Catherine disappear into the earth. I watched Michael follow her. Something inside me cracked a fissure running through everything I thought I knew about my life. Then I saw it, a flicker across Victoria's face as the caskets vanished. Her lips curved, just slightly, just for a moment. A smile. My daughter was smiling at her mother's grave, and in that instant, the grief in my chest turned to ice. Before I could process what I had seen, that flicker of a smile on my daughter's face, Victoria was walking toward me. Her heels clicked against the Memorial Park's stone pathway, each step deliberate, predatory. The mourners parted for her like she was royalty. Or a threat, Dad. Her voice carried manufactured concern. We need to talk about the will. Mr. Pemberton is waiting. Today I heard myself say, Victoria, we just buried your mother, which is exactly why we cannot delay. There are financial matters that need immediate attention. You understand. I searched her face for any trace of the daughter I had raised. The little girl who made me Father's Day cards with glitter glue. The teenager who cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart. I found nothing. Just cold calculation behind those pale blue eyes. Have you ever had someone you love look at you like you are a stranger? Like everything you shared meant nothing. That is how my daughter looked at me as she walked me to the car. 1 hour later, I sat in the offices of Pemberton and Associates in downtown Phoenix. Gerald Pemberton sat behind his mahogany desk, 63 years old, silver-rimmed glasses perched on a nose that had delivered difficult news for 4 decades. His leather chair creaked as he opened the manila folder with practiced solemnity. Victoria sat across from me, Marcus hovering at her shoulder. The room smelled of expensive leather and old money. The air conditioning hummed. Everything felt sterile, surgical. Pemberton began reading. Our family has endured significant financial strain due to decisions made without my consultation. Reckless investments. Poor judgment. A pattern of behavior that has placed everything we built at risk. I need you to understand something. In 62 years, I have never gambled. Not a lottery ticket, not a poker game, not a single bet. The words coming from that folder were not just wrong, they were impossible. Then Pemberton produced a USB drive. Mrs. Sullivan recorded this herself, he said. She wanted her voice to deliver the final provisions. He pressed play. Catherine's voice filled the room, and my heart shattered all over again. To my daughter Victoria and her husband Marcus, I leave the family home, Sullivan Industries, and all associated assets. They have shown the judgment and stability our family needs. I gripped the armrests until my knuckles went white. This was not Catherine. These were not her words. But it was her voice, clear and unmistakable, condemning me. To my husband Robert, I leave the property in Whispering Pines, Nevada. It is my hope that he will find peace there, away from the damage he has caused. The recording ended. Silence pressed against my ears like a physical weight. This is not right, I managed. Catherine would never say these things. I have never gambled a day in my life. Victoria's expression did not change. Mother knew exactly what she was doing. We all did. I looked at Gerald Pemberton, hoping for something, anything, a flicker of doubt, a question about these accusations. He shuffled his papers, avoiding my eyes. Whatever had happened, whatever lies had been constructed, this man had decided it was not his concern. The room fell silent. Victoria's face held nothing, no triumph, no guilt, just the patient expression of someone who had already won. And I sat there, destroyed by words from a woman I had loved for 34 years, unable to fight accusations from a dead woman. Then Victoria leaned forward. There is one more thing, Dad. You have 72 hours to leave the house. Pack what you can carry. We will handle the rest. Her voice dropped. Leave quietly, and this stays private. Make trouble, and we pursue a formal investigation into your financial mismanagement. Your choice. 72 hours. That was how long my daughter gave me to erase 62 years of life. To pack what I could carry and disappear from the home where I had raised her, where I had built a marriage, where I had watched my children take their first steps. 72 hours to become a ghost. Victoria slid a plane ticket across the polished table. Phoenix to Reno. One way. You have 2 choices, Dad. Leave quietly, start fresh in Nevada, and we never speak of this again. Or contest the will and face a full investigation into your gambling addiction and the $31 million you cost this family. I stared at her. I never gambled a day in my life, Victoria. You know that. What I know is what the accountants found, what the bank records show, what Mother documented before she died. Her voice was ice. You can fight it if you want, but ask yourself, who will the world believe, a grieving daughter with evidence or a disgraced husband trying to rewrite history? Let me ask you something. If someone accused you of a crime you did not commit, if your own family presented evidence of things you never did, how would you prove your innocence? You cannot prove you did not gamble. You cannot prove you did not make bad investments. You can only point to the absence of proof. And absence, I learned that day, is no defense against a well-constructed lie. Gerald Pemberton pushed a stack of documents across the desk. Releases, waivers, agreements not to contest. Each page another piece of my life stripped away. Marcus stood frozen in the corner, unable to meet my eyes. My son-in-law of 12 years, a man who had sat at my Thanksgiving table, who had asked for my blessing before proposing to Victoria. Now he would not even look at me while his wife erased my existence. Whispering Pines, Victoria said, sliding the ticket closer. Mother's childhood home. It is quiet there. You will have time to reflect. You are my daughter, I said. My voice cracked. How can you do this? Victoria leaned forward, her pale blue eyes empty of anything human. By the end of the week, I want you out of that house. Pack your things, leave the keys. For everyone's sake, Dad. Sign the papers. It is better for everyone. I signed each document like a man signing his own death certificate. Each page stripped away another piece of who I was. Homeowner, husband, father, businessman. By the time I set down the pen, Robert Sullivan had ceased to exist. In his place stood a 62-year-old man with a duffel bag and a one-way ticket to nowhere. The pen scratched against paper. The air conditioning hummed. Victoria watched with the patient expression of someone who had already won. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a thought began to form, small and sharp, like a splinter working its way to the surface. I walked out of that building into the October heat, the ticket to Whispering Pines burning in my pocket like a brand. The door closed behind me, closing on my old life forever. The Phoenix sun beat down on my shoulders as I stood on the sidewalk, a ghost in broad daylight. And then it hit me. In 34 years of marriage, Catherine had never mentioned a childhood home in Nevada. Never shown me photographs. Never suggested we visit. Not once in thousands of conversations had she spoken of Whispering Pines. I knew her parents had lived in California. I knew her childhood memories centered on San Diego beaches and summer camps in the mountains. So why, in her final act, had she sent me to a place that did not exist in any memory we had shared? The question lodged in my mind like a splinter I could not remove. Michael's last text echoed, Dad. I found something. We need to talk. What had my son found, and what was waiting for me in Whispering Pines? 8 hours through the Mojave and the desert had become my confessional. The rental car's air conditioning wheezed against the October heat, while I replayed every moment of the past 72 hours. Victoria's ultimatum, the forged documents, Catherine's voice on that recording accusing me of sins I never committed. By the time I crossed into Nevada, my knuckles had turned white against the steering wheel. The landscape shifted from brown to rust to endless beige mile markers, counting down toward a destination I never knew existed. Catherine had kept this place hidden from me for 34 years. 34 years of marriage, of shared meals and whispered secrets and sleepless nights with sick children, and she never once mentioned a childhood home in Nevada. I thought I knew everything about my wife. I thought our love had no shadows. I was wrong. The realization settled into my bones like poison. Catherine had compartmentalized her life, kept pieces of herself locked away in places I couldn't reach. What else had she hidden? What else had I missed? While I was busy being the devoted husband, the proud father, the successful engineer who believed his family was exactly what it appeared to be. How does a man discover after 62 years that he never truly knew the woman who shared his bed. The highway stretched before me, a black ribbon cutting through the emptiness. I passed a gas station, then another, each one a ghost of American optimism left to bleach in the sun. My throat burned from the recycled air, metallic and stale, carrying the faint scent of dust that had seeped through the vents. I hadn't eaten since Phoenix, hadn't slept since the funeral. My body operated on grief and adrenaline, a machine running on fumes. Michael's face haunted me. 28 years old, brilliant, compassionate, gone. His last text message pulsed in my memory like a wound that wouldn't close. "Dad, we need to talk. There's something I found. Something about Victoria. Call me when you can." I never called. The accident happened 6 hours later. His Honda Civic wrapped around a guardrail on Route 167, Catherine in the passenger seat, both of them pronounced dead before the ambulance arrived. An accident, the police said. Faulty brakes. Tragic, but explainable. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The leather creaked beneath my fingers, hot from the sun that poured through the windshield. My reflection in the rearview mirror showed a stranger, a hollow-eyed man with gray stubble and the posture of defeat. But somewhere beneath that broken exterior, something else stirred. Something cold and patient and dangerous. You want to know what keeps a man driving when his world has collapsed? It's not hope. It's not faith. It's the tiny voice whispering that nothing is what it seems, that the daughter who smiled at her mother's grave is capable of things no father wants to imagine. The sun began its descent, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. I pulled off the highway onto a smaller road, following directions to an address I'd found scribbled on the back of the plane ticket. Catherine's handwriting. Even in exile, she was guiding me somewhere. But as the shadows lengthened and the temperature dropped, another thought surfaced. Michael had texted me about Victoria. 6 hours later, he was dead. Catherine had hidden this place from everyone, including me. And now Victoria had sent me here to this exact location with suspicious efficiency. The coincidences were piling up like evidence at a crime scene. My son had discovered something about his sister. My wife had maintained a secret sanctuary, and my daughter had orchestrated my exile with the precision of someone who had planned it long before the funeral. What did Michael find that cost him his life? And why did Catherine want me to find it here? The cottage looked like something the desert was slowly swallowing. I pulled up to 1847 Route 167 as the last light bled from the sky, and for a long moment I just sat there staring at what Catherine had left me. Paint peeling in long strips like dead skin, roof sagging in the middle like a broken spine, windows cracked and dark. This was my inheritance. This was where my wife had sent me to die. I stepped out of the car, and the desert wind hit me cold now that the sun was gone. The questions from the drive still churned in my mind. Michael's text about Victoria, Catherine's secret property, the suspicious precision of my exile. But standing before this ruin, those questions felt distant, abstract. What mattered now was simpler. I had nowhere else to go. The front door groaned when I pushed it open. Dust swirled in the beam of my phone's flashlight, dancing particles that hadn't been disturbed in years. Furniture crouched beneath yellowed sheets like ghosts waiting to be revealed. The air tasted stale, thick with mildew and abandonment. My footsteps creaked against warped floorboards as I moved through the darkness. Then I reached the kitchen, and I stopped breathing. On a bare wooden table, gleaming in the pale light, sat a revolver. A Smith & Wesson .38, cleaned and oiled with the cylinder open to reveal 6 brass rounds. Catherine hated guns, would not even let Michael have a BB gun as a child. Had argued with me for years about the Second Amendment. So why was this here who had left it? The mystery should have alarmed me. Instead, I felt something else entirely. I felt relief. I need you to understand what that moment felt like. Standing in a dead woman's abandoned house, holding a gun that should not exist, with nothing ahead of me, but empty days in an empty town where no one knew my name. I was 62 years old. My wife was dead. My son was dead. My daughter had erased me from existence with forged documents and a recording I still could not explain. And in my hand was a simple solution to a complicated problem. 6 rounds. One would be enough. I walked to the bedroom, revolver heavy in my grip. Sat down on a dusty mattress that smelled of decay and forgotten years. The springs groaned beneath my weight. Outside, the wind howled through cracks in the walls, the only sound in miles of emptiness. Have you ever held your own ending in your hands? Felt the weight of it cold and certain? I sat on that dusty bed with the revolver in my lap, and I thought about who would come to my funeral. Victoria. She would probably smile again, that subtle curve of her lips as the casket lowered. Marcus would not even show up. There was no one left who cared whether Robert Sullivan lived or died. No reason to keep fighting, no reason to keep breathing. My thumb found the hammer. My finger curled around the trigger. I raised the barrel toward my temple and closed my eyes, and that is when I smelled it. Silver sage. Faint at first, then stronger, sweet and herbal and impossible. Catherine's flower. The one she planted at every house we had ever lived in. The one she pressed into books and tucked into my luggage when I traveled. The one she said meant I am here when I cannot be here. But that was impossible. This house had been abandoned for years. Nothing could be alive in here. Nothing should smell like life in a place this dead. I lowered the gun slowly, my heart pounding against my ribs. The scent was coming from somewhere deeper in the cottage, from behind the bedroom closet door, from something that should not exist. Catherine, what did you leave me? I woke to silver sage. Not faint anymore, but strong, filling the dusty bedroom, like Catherine herself had walked through the door. Morning light cut through cracked blinds, and for one impossible second, I thought she was there. That the funeral had been a nightmare, that I would turn and see her standing in the doorway with that knowing smile. But she was not there. Only her scent. Only her ghost. The revolver still lay on the nightstand. I did not look at it. Something had changed in the night, something fragile that I was afraid to name. Hope, maybe. Or madness. Either way, I needed to find the source of that scent. I followed it through the cottage like a man tracking a memory. Past the kitchen, through a narrow hallway thick with dust, to the bedroom closet where the smell was strongest. The door groaned when I pulled it open, and what I saw made no sense. A silver sage plant, blooming, impossibly alive in a cracked clay pot, its leaves green and healthy in a house abandoned for years. The plant was thriving as if someone had been watering it, tending it, keeping it alive for exactly this moment. Let me tell you what it feels like to receive a message from the dead. Your hands shake, your heart pounds. You kneel in a dusty closet, touching leaves that should not exist, understanding that your wife planned this, that she knew you would come. Beneath the pot, half buried in dust, sat a silver box, small, elegant, engraved with a sage leaf pattern Catherine had loved. I lifted it with trembling fingers. Inside, a micro SD card, no bigger than my thumbnail, and a note. Cream-colored paper, soft and worn as if Catherine had held it many times. Her handwriting, the familiar loops I had seen on grocery lists and birthday cards for 34 years. 4 words that rewrote everything. Don't trust the will. Trust this. I read it again and again. The words blurred through tears I did not realize were falling. Catherine knew. The will, the recording, the accusations. All lies. My wife had hidden the truth in this cottage and trusted that I would find it. How long had she been planning this? I stared at that sage plant, and the math did not add up. Someone had watered it recently. Someone had placed the box. Catherine died 3 weeks ago. Had she come here before the accident? Had she known she was going to die? The questions spiraled, each darker than the last. But one thing was certain. My wife had left me a weapon, and I was going to use it. I held the micro SD card between my fingers, smaller than a thumbnail, but heavy with everything Catherine wanted me to know. Whatever was on this card had been worth hiding. Worth dying for, maybe. I needed to see it. Catherine's old Dell laptop, the one she always brought on trips. It should still be in the storage shed behind the cottage. I was already moving toward the door when the realization hit me like ice water. If Catherine had hidden the truth here, it meant someone wanted it buried. And if Victoria suspected what her mother had left behind, then I was not just searching for answers. I was running out of time. The shed door was rusted shut. I threw my shoulder against it once, twice, 3 times before the hinges screamed and gave way. Inside, decades of forgotten furniture, cardboard boxes bloated with moisture, and there on a warped wooden shelf beneath a tarp gray with dust, Catherine's old Dell laptop. The one she used for personal files. The one she never let anyone touch. I grabbed it and ran back to the cottage, rust flakes still clinging to my palms. The micro SD card burned in my pocket like a promise. I needed power. I needed this ancient machine to wake up one more time. The laptop was dead. Completely dead. I pressed the power button and nothing happened. I pressed it again, holding it down, willing the screen to flicker. Nothing. I tore through the cottage like a madman, yanking open drawers, dumping boxes, searching for any cord that might fit. Kitchen cabinets, bedroom closets, a storage bin filled with Christmas decorations we never used. And then buried beneath old photo albums, a power adapter. The right one. I plugged it in. Pressed power. The screen flickered once, and the Dell logo appeared crawling across blackness like a resurrection. The battery indicator showed 3%, then 2. I watched the number drop, and felt my heart drop with it. Everything Catherine wanted me to know was on this card. Everything that could prove my innocence, explain her death, expose whatever Victoria had done. And it was all about to disappear into a black screen because of a decade-old laptop with a dying battery. The fan whirred desperately, the machine burning hot beneath my fingers. I could smell it overheating, that acrid scent of electronics pushed beyond their limits. The boot sequence took forever. Blue loading bar inching across the screen while I forgot how to breathe. Have you ever stared at a loading bar that held your entire future? Watched it crawl across the screen pixel by pixel while your heart tried to beat its way out of your chest. That is what those 90 seconds felt like. 90 seconds of watching a blue bar inch toward completion while the battery dropped from 2% to 1. I did not breathe. I did not move. I just watched and prayed to a God I had stopped believing in. The desktop appeared. The micro SD slot was on the side, a tiny rectangle I almost missed. I slid the card in with trembling fingers. The laptop recognized it instantly. A window opened, 4 folders, arranged on the dusty desktop like Catherine had organized her own death. Financial evidence, Catherine's letter, video proof, Michael's message. My wife and son had left me a roadmap through their own murders. I moved the cursor toward financial evidence. The folder Catherine had placed first. The folder she wanted me to open first. The laptop flickered once, threatening to die. I clicked before I could think twice. 87 PDF files filled the screen. Bank statements, wire transfers, shell company registrations, corporate filings dated back 7 years. And at the top of every single document, a signature I recognized. A signature that stopped my heart. Victoria Sullivan Hartley. My daughter had not just betrayed me. She had been stealing from the family for years. Systematically. Methodically. While smiling at Thanksgiving dinners and kissing my cheek at Christmas. While Catherine watched and documented and prepared for the day I would need to know, the laptop flickered again. 1% battery. The charger was plugged in, but barely keeping the machine alive. I had minutes, maybe less, to understand what Catherine had found, but I already knew enough. My daughter was a thief, and somewhere in these files was proof of something far worse. I started scrolling. $47.7 million. I stared at that number on the screen, trying to make it fit inside my head. 47,700,000. Stolen over 7 years. And every single transaction, every wire transfer, every shell company registration bore the same signature in the same confident hand, Victoria Sullivan Hartley. My daughter. My firstborn. My thief. The scrolling had revealed everything. Michael had organized the evidence with the precision I had taught him as a boy. Color-coded files filled the screen. Red for confirmed fraud, yellow for suspicious transactions. Shell companies in Delaware and Nevada with names designed to sound legitimate. Fake invoices from vendors that did not exist. Wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands that I had never heard of. 7 years of systematic theft, starting the very year we promoted her to CEO. The year we trusted her with everything. Do you know what $47 million looks like? I did not. Not really. But I knew what it felt like to scroll through 87 documents that proved my daughter had been stealing from us since she was 31 years old. Each file was a knife. Each signature was a confession. And my son, my brilliant, methodical son, had found every single one of them before he died. The laptop fan whirred desperately, the machine burning hot against the table. I barely noticed. My eyes moved from document to document, watching the numbers climb. 2 million in the first year, 4 million in the second. By the 5th year, Victoria was siphoning nearly 10 million annually. She had refined her technique. Grown bolder, created an entire architecture of theft that would have made a career criminal envious. And she had done it while smiling at us across dinner tables, while kissing my cheek at Christmas, while holding Catherine's hand at her cancer screenings and promising to take care of everything. Let me tell you what happens when you discover your own child is a monster. First comes disbelief. This cannot be real. Then comes the math, adding up numbers until they crush the air from your lungs. Then comes the timeline, realizing she was stealing during family dinners, during holidays. During the day, she walked me down the aisle at her wedding. And finally, underneath all of it, comes rage, cold and black and patient. The kind of rage that does not scream. The kind that waits. I understood now. The gambling story. The 31 million I supposedly lost to addiction. Victoria needed someone to blame for the missing money. She had been planning this for years, building a narrative that would explain the holes in the company finances. When Catherine got sick, when Michael started auditing the books, Victoria accelerated her timeline. She created the fake will. She planted the recording. She framed me for her own crimes. My wife had seen it all. Catherine had watched our daughter transform into something unrecognizable and had documented everything, preparing for the day I would need to know the truth. I closed the financial evidence folder with trembling hands. $47 million. 7 years of theft. My daughter was a criminal, and my wife and son had died trying to expose her. But Catherine had organized these folders in a specific order. Financial evidence was first. There were 3 more folders waiting. Catherine's letter, video proof, Michael's message. The money was just the beginning. Catherine wanted me to understand the theft before she showed me something worse. I moved my cursor to the second folder. Catherine's letter. A PDF dated 6 weeks before the accident. Before I could click a single question, stopped me cold. If Victoria was willing to steal $47 million from her own family, what else was she willing to do to keep it? My dearest Robert. Catherine's handwriting filled the screen, and for a moment I could not breathe. 3 pages dated 6 weeks before she died. 6 weeks. She had known something was coming. She had prepared for it. And she had written me a letter that began the way every letter she ever wrote me began, with those same 3 words. My dearest Robert. I started to read, and the world I thought I knew collapsed completely. Catherine explained everything. She had discovered Victoria's embezzlement 22 months ago during a routine audit. When she confronted our daughter privately, Victoria responded with threats. If Catherine exposed her, Victoria would destroy our family's reputation and frame me for the missing money. Michael discovered the same theft independently through his IT work and began secretly gathering evidence alongside his mother. The will. The fake will. Catherine had written it herself. I had to stop reading. My hands were shaking so badly the words blurred. Catherine had not betrayed me. She had sacrificed herself for me. Every accusation in that lawyer's office, every cold word from the recording, every ounce of shame I felt standing in front of my daughter while my dead wife called me a failure. All of it was a lie, a beautiful, terrible, protective lie, designed to push me somewhere Victoria could never find me. I forced myself to continue. Catherine had moved $52 million to Canada under her maiden name Brennan, using money from her parents' inheritance in 2015. She had leased this cottage under that same name. She had contacted FBI Special Agent Diana Rourke 4 months before her death, an agent who had been building a financial crimes case and was waiting for evidence to arrive. Do you understand what my wife did? She knew her own daughter was a thief. She knew Victoria had threatened her. And instead of going to the police immediately, instead of exposing everything, she spent 22 months building a trap, moving money, preparing a hideout, writing a fake will that would make the world hate her husband so that her husband would survive. Catherine did not just love me. She went to war for me, and she never told me a word. The letter's final lines shattered me. Victoria will search for you after we are gone. The cottage is safe. Go to Canada. Contact Diana Rourke. Finish what Michael and I started. Trust no one else. After we are gone. Not if we die. After we are gone. As if Catherine knew. As if she expected it. I read the letter 3 times. Then I read it again. 52 million in Canada. An FBI contact waiting. A cottage Victoria could never find. Catherine had built me an escape route and a weapon, but that phrase haunted me, circling my mind like a vulture. Victoria will search for you after we are gone. My wife had anticipated her own death. I looked at the 2 remaining folders. Video proof. Michael's message. Catherine had shown me the theft. She had explained her plan. But there were still 2 folders left. 2 folders that would answer the question. I could not stop asking if Victoria was willing to threaten her own mother. Was she also willing to kill her? My finger hovered over video proof. 94 files waited inside. 94 pieces of evidence that Michael and Catherine had gathered over 2 years. Evidence they had died protecting. I clicked. The files loaded slowly on the dying laptop. Video files, screen recordings, audio captures. And in the first video, time-stamped August 2016, I saw my daughter's face on a video call. She was talking to someone off-screen, her voice calm and businesslike. The words that came out of her mouth turned my blood to ice. We need to eliminate the old problem before the audit. The first video was dated March 2016. 2.5 years before my wife and son died. Victoria sat in her office at Sullivan Industries Marcus beside her, and I watched my daughter say words that stopped my heart. We need to eliminate the old problem before it eliminates us. Marcus nodded. Victoria smiled. And I understood that my daughter had been planning murder for years. 94 files. Michael had organized them chronologically, each one a step in Victoria's descent, from embezzler to killer. Videos 2 through 10 documented bank transfers and shell company meetings, coded conversations about moving money and covering tracks. But video 11 froze my blood. Screen capture footage from a shared family tablet. The tablet that sat in our living room for years. Victoria's browser history filled the screen: how to cause brake failure without detection, car accident, untraceable methods, brake line sabotage symptoms. She had searched for murder techniques on a device her mother and brother could access. Michael must have found that history. He must have realized what his sister was planning. I need you to understand what it feels like to watch your own child plan murder. You see her face, the face you watched grow from infant to woman. You hear her voice, the voice that once called you daddy. And you listen to her calmly discuss making sure they do not survive. Your wife, your son, her mother, her brother, eliminated like problems on a spreadsheet. I watched 11 videos before I had to stop. Not because I could not bear to see more, but because my hands were shaking too badly to click the mouse. Video 37 contained intercepted phone calls. Victoria's voice crackled through laptop speakers discussing the arrangement with someone whose voice I did not recognize. The arrangement needs to happen during the Route 66 trip. Make it look like an accident. A pause. Then I do not care how. Just make sure they do not survive. Route 66. Catherine and Michael died on Route 66. Brake failure. The car went into a ravine. An accident, the police said. But it was not an accident. It was an arrangement. How do you unsee something like that? How do you unhear your daughter ordering the deaths of her mother and brother? Catherine and Michael died on Route 66 because Victoria arranged it. She used a family tablet to research how to kill them. She paid someone to sabotage their brakes. And she did it all to protect $47 million in stolen money. My daughter murdered my wife and my son. I sat in that dark cottage, the laptop screen glowing with evidence of Victoria's crimes, and I understood everything now. The theft, the threats, the fake will that Catherine had written to protect me. The accident that was never an accident. Victoria had eliminated everyone who could expose her, and she thought she had gotten away with it. She thought I was a broken old man, exiled to the desert with nothing but a fabricated gambling addiction and a dead wife's accusations. She did not know about Catherine's plan. She did not know about the evidence Michael had gathered. She did not know that I was sitting in a cottage she could never find, watching proof of her crimes unfold on a dying laptop. One folder remained. Michael's message. My son had left me something. His final words. His last testament before Victoria's arrangement killed him. I clicked the folder with trembling hands. A single audio file appeared, Michael_final_message.mp3. 47 minutes long. Recorded 2 days before he died. My son's voice was about to fill this dusty room. The last words he would ever say to me. I pressed play and held my breath. My son's voice filled the cottage for the first time in 3 weeks. Hey Dad, it's Michael. October 15th, 2018. If you're hearing this, Mom and I didn't make it. I stopped breathing. The dead do not speak. But here was my boy alive in my ears talking to me from the grave. 47 minutes. That is how long Michael spoke. He told me everything. 18 months ago, during a routine IT audit, he found discrepancies in the company servers. $47 million moved through shell companies, all traced back to Victoria. He had confronted her privately, thinking he could reason with his own sister. Biggest mistake of my life, Dad. She looked at me like I was already dead and said, "You tell Dad and I'll destroy everything he loves, starting with Mom." Michael and Catherine had talked. They could have run. They could have told me. But Victoria would have come for me first. So they stayed. They gathered evidence. They built a case that would destroy her. Have you ever heard a dead person say goodbye, not in memory, not in dreams, but their actual voice recorded hours before they were murdered. Speaking directly to you, that is what 47 minutes of Michael's message felt like. Every word was a knife. Every pause was a grave. My son knew he was going to die. He knew Victoria's threats were not empty. And he stayed anyway. I'm not afraid, Dad. I'm proud. Mom and I chose this. We chose to protect you. The tears came then. Not the weak tears of grief I had shed at the funeral. These were different. Harder. My son chose to die for me. My wife chose to die for me. And I had spent 3 weeks believing they had betrayed me. I had held a gun to my head in this very room, ready to end my worthless life. They died heroes. I almost died a fool. Michael's voice continued growing softer toward the end. He told me about the FBI contact, about Catherine's plan to move money to Canada, about the cottage Victoria would never find. He told me he loved me. He told me to finish what he and Catherine had started. Then his final words, struggling through labored breathing. Dad, if you're hearing this, check the sage. Everything you need. Mom hid it where the sage grows. Check the sage, Dad. His voice broke weak and strained. Evidence package sent. October 15th, 11:47 p.m. The recording ended with static. Someone else had copies of everything. Michael had sent the evidence to a failsafe I did not yet know about, and he had told me exactly where to find Catherine's final message. The sage, the silver sage, that had led me to this cottage in the first place. Silence filled the cottage. I sat in the darkness, my son's voice still echoing in my ears, and I understood what I had to do. Catherine and Michael had died to give me this weapon. I would not waste their sacrifice. I would take this evidence to Diana Rourke. I would watch Victoria's world collapse. I would make my daughter pay for murdering my family. Then I heard it. A sound that did not belong. Gravel crunching outside. Headlights sweeping across the cottage windows, painting white stripes on the dusty walls. Car doors slamming. 1, 2, 3. Victoria's voice cut through the Nevada night, sharp and businesslike. Check the cottage. He's been here too long. They had found me. Victoria had tracked me to the one place Catherine thought she would never look. The evidence was on this laptop, on the micro SD card in my pocket. Everything my wife and son had died for, and my daughter's people were 20 feet from the door. I had seconds to decide: surrender and die or run and fight. I killed the laptop screen. Darkness swallowed the cottage. Outside, an engine idled at the end of the dirt road. A black Tesla, headlights off, waiting like a predator. Victoria had not just found me. She had been watching, waiting for me to find everything before she made her move. This was never a search. It was a trap. I moved through the darkness with desperate efficiency, muscle memory guiding me through a cottage I had explored for barely a day. The micro SD card went into my shoe, taped against the sole, with medical tape from the bathroom. Catherine's evidence against my skin. My father's Seiko watch went into my pocket, the only inheritance worth keeping. $800 in cash. A dead man's watch. A card smaller than my thumbnail. This is what 40 years of building a life comes down to. Through the window, I watched the Tesla's silhouette. A figure emerged from the driver's side. Unhurried, confident. The walk of someone who had done this before. You want to know what survival feels like? It feels like taping evidence inside your shoe while a killer walks toward your door. It feels like choosing which memories to leave behind, because you can only carry what fits in your pockets. It feels like saying goodbye to your dead wife's hiding place while your heart screams to stay and fight. But I could not fight. Not yet. Not with everything Catherine and Michael had died for sitting in my shoe. The figure passed under the single streetlight at the edge of the property, and my blood turned to ice. Marcus Hartley, 42 years old, Victoria's husband of 15 years, a man I had welcomed into my family and toasted at Thanksgiving dinners. In the murder planning videos, he had discussed killing my wife with the casual tone of someone ordering lunch. Now he walked toward my door with that same unhurried confidence, his face illuminated, just long enough for me to see him smile. How long does it take a man to walk 200 yards? I counted his steps through the window, measured my remaining life in footfalls. 60 seconds, 90. Does it matter when you are watching your executioner approach in real time? Marcus stopped 20 feet from the cottage. He pulled out his phone. My pocket buzzed. A text from Victoria. The screen glowed in the darkness like a taunt. "Hi, Daddy. Marcus says hello. You have something that belongs to me. Come outside and we can discuss this like family." Family. She used that word. The woman who murdered her mother and brother, who framed her father for gambling addiction, who sent her husband to finish what the brake tampering had started. Family. I looked at the back window. The desert stretched into darkness beyond the glass, cold and vast and terrifying. But it was also empty. No headlights. No figures. No trap that I could see. $800. One micro SD card containing proof of $47 million in theft and 2 premeditated murders. And a 2-minute head start if I moved right now. Marcus's footsteps resumed. Gravel crunched beneath his shoes, each step bringing him closer to the porch, closer to the door, closer to the evidence that would destroy his wife and send them both to prison for the rest of their lives. Catherine had planned for this. She had hidden everything here, knowing Victoria might come looking. She had given me a weapon and a reason to survive. My wife and son had died so I could live. I would not waste their sacrifice. I moved toward the back window. Heart-pounding evidence burning against my foot, my daughter's husband, 10 seconds from the front door. The phone rang as my fingers touched the back window. Victoria's number glowed on the screen. I answered the call from my daughter, the one who murdered my wife and son. Daddy. Victoria's voice came through like silk wrapped around a razor. My eldest child, 38 years old, CEO of the company I built, murderer of her mother and brother, speaking to me with the same sweet tone she had used at age 6, asking for ice cream. "I've been so worried about you." I pressed my back against the cottage wall, watching Marcus's shadow through the front window, and played the role of my life. "I'm fine, sweetheart." My voice cracked perfectly, not from performance, but from genuine exhaustion that I channeled into weakness. "Just tired. So tired. Your mother's things are here. Dusty boxes. Nothing important." Marcus stood motionless on the porch, phone to his ear, waiting for orders. Victoria was running this operation from Phoenix, and I was caught between her voice in my ear and her assassin 10 feet away. Have you ever had to lie to someone who murdered your family? Have you ever had to make your voice shake with fake grief while rage boiled in your chest? I stood in that dark cottage, phone pressed to my ear, and gave the performance of my life. Academy Award for Best Actor in a Survival Situation. The prize was living until morning. "Did you find anything interesting?" Victoria's tone shifted slightly, an edge beneath the honey. "Mom sometimes left old papers around. Financial documents, that sort of thing." There it was. The slip. She knew about Catherine's evidence. She had known all along. "Just dust, honey." I let my voice waver. Dust and memories. Nothing worth keeping. Silence stretched between us. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper, steadying myself against the urge to scream accusations through the phone. "What does it cost to call your father Daddy while planning his murder? What kind of person asks about her mother's hidden papers while her hired man waits outside to finish the job?" I used to wonder. Where I went wrong raising Victoria. Now I wondered if she had ever been human at all. "Good." Victoria's voice warmed again, satisfied. "That's good, Daddy. Stay there tonight. Don't go anywhere. For your safety." I'll have someone check on you in the morning. For your safety. She said it the way a doctor says this won't hurt. Both lies. Both preludes to something terrible. Okay, sweetheart. I made my voice small, defeated. I'll be here. I hung up and watched through the window. Marcus checked his phone, read something, and then turned and walked back to the Tesla. The engine started. The headlights swept across the desert. The car pulled away into the darkness. Victoria had called him off. For 30 seconds, I stood frozen, trying to understand. Why send Marcus all this way just to retreat? Why the phone call, the probing questions, the sweet lies? My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria, sweet dreams, Daddy. See you tomorrow. The words hit me like ice water. She was not sending Marcus tonight. She was not trusting this to hired help. My daughter was coming herself. Victoria wanted to watch me die. She wanted to be there when her father took his last breath, the same way she had probably wanted to be there when Catherine and Michael crashed into that ravine. Some monsters need to see the light leave their victims' eyes. I had until dawn. Maybe less. Victoria would bring resources Marcus could not. Professionals, backup. Whatever it took to recover the evidence and eliminate the last witness to her crimes. I looked at the back window, then at the empty desert beyond. Time to run. 3 degrees Celsius. 11 p.m. I stripped off my light-colored shirt and pulled on the darkest clothes I could find. A navy sweater. Catherine had packed black work pants from the closet. Victoria thought she had until morning. She was wrong. I was not waiting for my daughter to come kill me. I was leaving tonight. I killed every light in the cottage and memorized the back window's position. Checked that the micro SD card was secure in my shoe. $800 in my pocket. My father's Seiko watch. The revolver I left behind. I would not become a killer to catch one. At 11:07 p.m. headlights appeared on Route 167. Marcus had returned. Either he had disobeyed Victoria's orders, or she had lied about waiting until morning. Either way, my window had shrunk from hours to seconds. I heard gravel crunch, footsteps on the porch. Then the front door exploded inward with a single kick. I dropped from the back window into the freezing Nevada night. You want to know what it feels like to run for your life at 62. Your knees scream. Your lungs burn. Every step is a negotiation between terror and physics. You tell yourself you will rest in a minute, just one more minute, but you know stopping means dying. So you keep running. Because your murdered son told you to live, northwest. The highway was northwest. I ran through the darkness, feet pounding against cold sand, breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind me, the Tesla's engine roared to life. A spotlight swept across the desert, hunting for movement. Then the dust storm hit. It came like the wrath of God, if God had decided just this once, to take the side of a broken old man against a monster in human skin. Sand scoured my face. Wind pushed me sideways. I could not see my own hands in front of me. But behind me, that Tesla spotlight died in the swirling chaos. The storm was trying to kill me, but it was killing my hunters faster. I ran blind. The wind told me which direction was northwest, and I trusted it with my life. Sand filled my mouth, my nose, my eyes. My lungs burned from cold and exertion. My bad left knee screamed with every impact. But I did not stop. Michael and Catherine died for this evidence. I did not get to stop. Minutes stretched into eternity. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsed behind a rock formation with sand still whipping around me. The storm was weakening. Soon Marcus would be able to search again. I checked my shoe. Micro SD card still there. I checked my pocket. Phone dead from the cold. I was alive. I was lost. I was freezing. And somewhere in this desert was a highway, a town, a chance. Catherine, if you can hear me, thank you for the dark sweater. Thank you for oiling that window. Thank you for thinking of everything. I forced myself up on shaking legs. Northwest. Keep moving northwest. The dust was settling, visibility slowly returning. My fingers were numb, my lips cracked and bleeding. Every breath tasted like sand and copper. That is when I saw the lights, not Tesla headlights. Something else. A building alone on the highway, windows glowing yellow through the thinning dust. A diner, open at nearly midnight in the middle of nowhere like an answered prayer. I stumbled toward those lights. Each step was a victory against my failing body. The wind died. The sand settled. And through the clearing air I read the sign, Desert Rose Diner. Open 24 hours. I had escaped the storm. I had escaped Marcus. But I was hypothermic, exhausted, and running on nothing but desperation. I needed help. I needed warmth. I needed someone who would not ask too many questions. I pushed toward the diner's light. The diner was a mirage. By the time I reached where it should have been, there was nothing but rocks and sagebrush. My mind was playing tricks. Hypothermia's first gift before it kills you. I stood in the freezing darkness, completely lost, and laughed. A broken, hollow sound. Then I started walking again. Because stopping meant dying. I wandered for what felt like hours. The dust storm had disoriented me completely. North could have been south. The highway could have been anywhere. My feet moved on autopilot while my thoughts grew sluggish, confused. Catherine always said I was too stubborn to die. Tonight I was proving her right. That is when I found the truck, a rusted Chevrolet Silverado abandoned in a wash between two rock formations. A hunter's truck, maybe left to rot for reasons I would never know. I forced the door open and collapsed inside. On the passenger seat, a half-full water bottle and a Carhartt jacket. I drank the stale water like it was champagne. Pulled on the jacket and felt warmth seep back into my bones. Let me tell you about cold. Not winter in Phoenix cold, not forgot your jacket cold. Real cold. The kind that stops your thoughts mid-sentence. The kind that makes your fingers feel like someone else's. I was dying by degrees out there in that desert, and the only thing keeping me moving was spite. Pure, stubborn spite. Victoria would not win, not tonight. I crawled beneath the truck to rest just for a moment. That is when the Tesla appeared. Headlights swept across the desert. A spotlight cut through the darkness, hunting for movement. I pressed myself into the frozen earth and held my breath. The light passed directly over the Silverado, paused, moved on, came back. 20 minutes under that truck. 20 minutes with my face in the dirt while Marcus's spotlight hunted for me. I counted my heartbeats. Listened to the Tesla's engine. Thought about Catherine's face, Michael's voice, the evidence taped to my foot. 20 minutes that felt like 20 years. And when the engine finally faded, I cried. Silently into the frozen sand, I cried like a child. Then I got up and kept walking. The Carhartt jacket had a faded name tag stitched inside, property of WPSD. Whispering Pines Sheriff's Department. A deputy's jacket in an abandoned truck in the middle of the desert. I was walking through a story larger than my own. The desert was full of secrets. I spotted the glow of Route 167 on the horizon. 5 miles, maybe less. Michael ran track in high school. He could do 5 miles in under 30 minutes. I would be lucky to do it in 3 hours. But I would do it. I had to. I was a half-mile from the highway when I heard another engine. Not the Tesla. Something bigger. Headlights appeared on the road, moving slow, searching. A white van with no markings. It stopped at the roadside and 2 figures climbed out with flashlights. The beams swept methodically, professionally. These were not amateurs. Victoria had not just sent Marcus, she had sent a team. I dropped behind a boulder watching them search. My body screamed for rest. My legs trembled beneath me. I could not survive another night in this desert. but the highway was now blocked by people who wanted me dead. The flashlights swept closer. One of the figures spoke into a radio. The other pointed toward the rocks where I was hiding. I had come so far. Survived the cottage, the storm, the cold, Marcus's spotlight. And now, half a mile from salvation, Victoria's hunters were walking straight toward me. I woke to the sound of tires on gravel and knew I was either saved or dead. My face was pressed against cold asphalt dawn light cutting through my eyelids like knives. I could not feel my fingers, could not feel my feet. A car door opened somewhere above me. Footsteps approached. A woman's voice sharp with concern. "Oh my God. Sir, can you hear me?" The white van was gone. Victoria's search team had hunted the wrong area while I stumbled the final distance to the highway. My survival was not luck. It was endurance outlasting my hunters. Maria Gonzalez knelt beside me on that frozen highway. 55 years old, silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun, still wearing hospital scrubs from her night shift. Her hands moved with the confidence of 3 decades in nursing, checking my pulse, my pupils, my temperature. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense voice, and she saved my life without ever asking why it needed saving. "Don't try to talk," she said, wrapping me in an emergency blanket from her trunk. "You're hypothermic. Core temperature probably 94-95 degrees. You're lucky to be alive." "Family trouble," I managed to whisper. She paused, studying my face, then nodded slowly. "I've seen family trouble before. The kind that leaves people on highways at dawn. You don't have to explain. Do you know what it feels like to be saved by a stranger? Not in a movie way. No dramatic speeches, no heroic music. Just a tired woman in scrubs who stops her car because she sees someone dying and decides that helping matters more than getting home to sleep. Maria Gonzalez saved my life with blankets and coffee and questions she chose not to ask. That is what real heroes look like. She drove me to her home, made me soup. Let me shower and change into clean clothes she said belonged to her son. When I was stable enough to stand without shaking, she did something I will never forget. She handed me keys to a silver Honda Civic. "My son's in the army," she explained. "Won't need this for 6 months. Return it when you can, or don't. Some things matter more than cars." "I'll pay you back," I told her. "Everything, I swear it." Maria smiled a tired smile that held decades of wisdom. "I know you will. I can see it in your eyes. You're not running from something. You're running toward something." She handed me the keys like she was handing me a second chance at life. Because she was. I stood in her driveway, this woman I had known for 2 hours, and I cried. Not the silent tears from the desert. Real crying, the kind that shakes your whole body. She just nodded like she understood everything. "Go," she said. "Do what you need to do. And survive." I asked why she was helping a stranger this way. She told me her own daughter had fled an abusive husband 5 years ago. Strangers had helped her survive when family could not. Maria was paying forward a debt she could never fully repay. "Good luck, Mr. Sullivan, Robert Sullivan. And I won't forget this. Ever." I drove north in Maria's son's Honda, evidence in my shoe, $800 in my pocket, and a name burning in my mind, Eleanor Hartwell. Catherine's letter had been specific. If everything went wrong, go to Vancouver. Find Eleanor Hartwell, the attorney Catherine had trusted with everything. The woman who held 52 million Canadian dollars with my name on it. I had a 12-hour drive ahead, and a daughter who would soon realize I had escaped. The race to Canada had begun. 65 miles per hour, not a mile faster. I drove like a man with nothing to hide and everything to lose. Baseball cap, pulled low sunglasses on even at dusk. Every cop car made my heart stop. Every black sedan in the rear view could be Victoria's people. 5 hours to Phoenix. 5 hours of paranoia, truck stop, coffee, and radio silence. I was not driving to Vancouver first. Catherine's letter had mentioned a second contact. James Sullivan, my brother, the one I had not spoken to in 8 years. Catherine had reconnected with him, secretly knowing I might need family help. She had built an underground railroad for my survival, and Phoenix was the next station. Flagstaff at midnight. Sedona at 3 a.m. Each mile marker a small victory. Each hour survived a miracle. I paid cash for everything, kept my face turned from cameras, bought gas station sandwiches that tasted like cardboard and coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. The Honda hummed beneath me, Maria's son's car, carrying me toward a brother I had wronged. Have you ever driven through the night knowing someone wants you dead? Every pair of headlights becomes a threat. Every rest stop is a potential ambush. You stop trusting your own shadow. I drove 5 hours in that state, wound tight as a spring, jumping at every semi-truck that passed too close. Sleep deprivation and paranoia make excellent traveling companions. Near dawn, somewhere outside Phoenix, I turned on the radio to fight the exhaustion. Static, country music, talk radio. Then a news broadcast that froze my blood. Sullivan Industries CEO Victoria Sullivan Hartley announced today that company founder Robert Sullivan has taken voluntary retirement effective immediately, citing health concerns following recent family tragedies. Voluntary retirement. I built that company from nothing. 40 years. And my daughter just erased me with a press release. The radio announcement hit me like a second funeral. Victoria was not just killing my body. She was killing my legacy, my identity, everything I had spent 40 years building. Voluntary retirement. Those two words erased decades of work, thousands of employees who knew my name, a company that bore my family's legacy. I was being murdered in slow motion, and the world was applauding my killer for her compassionate handling of a family tragedy. She was not just trying to kill me. She was making sure that when I died, no one would even notice I was gone. My passwords would be changed. My access revoked. My accounts frozen. All legally, all publicly justified. Victoria was executing a complete identity erasure, while I drove through the Arizona desert with evidence taped to my foot. I arrived in Phoenix at dawn and parked in a Walmart lot, slept for 2 hours with the micro SD card pressed against my chest, too exhausted to drive another mile, too paranoid to sleep anywhere traceable. I woke with the Arizona sun burning through the windshield and a realization crystallizing in my exhausted brain. Catherine's letter had mentioned James specifically. If Phoenix becomes necessary, James will help. I have already spoken to him. My wife had reached out to my estranged brother without telling me. She had prepared for this moment knowing I might need the one family member I had cut out of my life. 8 years since I had spoken to James. 8 years since he left Sullivan Industries over ethical concerns, and I had called him a coward for walking away from the family business. Now I had his address. I had the evidence, and I had to face the man I had wronged and ask him to save my life. Catherine had known this moment would come. She had prepared everything, even my humiliation. I started the Honda and pulled out of the parking lot, heading toward my brother's house. James Sullivan stood in his doorway at 7 a.m. 59 years old, my younger brother, by 3 years a civil engineer, who had walked away from Sullivan Industries because he said we were cutting too many corners. I had called him a coward. He had called me a sellout. We had not spoken since. Now he looked at me with eyes that held no anger, only recognition of what Catherine must have told him, and he stepped aside to let me in. 2 hours later, I was in his car, heading to Phoenix Sky Harbor, with fresh clothes, $600 in cash, and something I had not expected, forgiveness. The real test came at TSA. I placed my shoes on the X-ray belt, the micro SD card taped inside the insole. $47 million in evidence. Victoria's entire criminal empire in a chip smaller than my thumbnail. The belt hummed. My shoes disappeared into the machine. Let me tell you about the longest 30 seconds of my life. That is how long the TSA agent stared at his screen while my shoes and my daughter's crimes passed through the X-ray. 30 seconds. I aged 10 years. I rehearsed a dozen lies. I pictured handcuffs questioning rooms, Victoria's lawyers arriving with bail money and a one-way ticket to a shallow grave. Then he waved me through and I remembered how to breathe. I collected my shoes with trembling hands. The evidence was still secure. I walked to the gate like a man without secrets, boarded the plane like a man without enemies, and watched Phoenix shrink beneath me like a life I was leaving behind. At 30,000 feet over Nevada, I made my final decision. The phone. The device Victoria could trace. The last electronic thread connecting me to my old life. I took it into the airplane lavatory and destroyed it piece by piece. I snapped the SIM card in half, then quarters. I broke the phone itself, scattering the remains in the trash. I held my father's Seiko watch in that cramped lavatory surrounded by broken phone pieces, and I cried. Not for the life I was leaving behind. That life was already dead, murdered by my own daughter. I cried because I was still alive to fight. Because Catherine and Michael's sacrifice had not been for nothing. Because at 62 years old, 30,000 feet in the air, I was finally free. The watch had been Dad's. He wore it the day I graduated, the day I married Catherine, the day Victoria was born. I pressed the cool face against my lips and made a promise. Catherine, Michael, I will not let you down. I swear it. The plane touched down in Vancouver at 4:47 p.m. local time. I had Eleanor Hartwell's address, memorized $52 million, waiting in Canadian accounts, and evidence that could send my daughter to prison for life. I walked through customs with my head down and my heart pounding. That is when I saw the television screen. A news broadcast. Victoria's face composed and grieving. The headline beneath it, "Search continues for missing businessman." Daughter fears father may have harmed himself. I stopped cold in the middle of the terminal. She had changed the narrative. I was not fleeing a murderer. I was a suicidal old man who had wandered into the desert to die. And Victoria was the worried daughter begging for his safe return. The cameras loved her. The anchor spoke about family tragedies and mental health awareness. Victoria dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. My daughter was not just trying to kill me. She was preparing the world to dismiss everything I might say. If I came forward now, I would not be a witness. I would be a confused, grieving old man suffering from delusions. Victoria was playing a long game, and I was running out of time to beat her. The woman holding the sign with my name looked nothing like a lawyer. She looked like a warrior. Eleanor Hartwell stood in Vancouver arrivals. 48 years old, silver hair pulled back severely, wearing a charcoal suit that said former prosecutor as clearly as a badge. She had the kind of eyes that had seen confessions and lies and learned to tell the difference. This was the woman Catherine had trusted with $52 million and the plan to save my life. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, "your wife told me you would come. I have been waiting." Catherine had given her my flight information months ago, predicting exactly which route I would take if everything went wrong. Eleanor was not here by chance. She was here by design. My wife's design. We drove through Vancouver's rain-slicked streets, while Eleanor explained 18 months of secret planning. Catherine had contacted her after discovering Victoria's embezzlement. Together they had moved 52 million Canadian dollars in legitimate Sullivan assets into accounts under my name. Real estate, investment portfolios, liquid assets. All legal, all untouchable by American courts. I sat in Eleanor's car as Vancouver rain streaked the windows, and I felt my wife's presence for the first time since her death. Not as a ghost, as an architect. Catherine had spent 18 months building me an ark while the flood gathered. She had known she might drown, and she had made sure I would float. That is love. Not flowers and poetry. Blueprints and bank accounts and a lawyer waiting at the airport with my name on a sign. She told me Eleanor set her eyes on the road. If Robert makes it to Vancouver, it means I am dead, and Victoria killed me. Help him survive. Help him fight back, before I show you what was inside that envelope. Are you still with me? Drop your prediction in one sentence. What do you think Catherine left waiting? Please note, the next part includes some fictionalized details added to deepen the emotional impact. The message is what matters. Can you imagine discovering that your murdered wife spent the last 18 months of her life preparing for her own death? Not accepting it. Weaponizing it. Catherine turned her murder into a loaded gun and put it in my hands. $52 million. Legal protection in a foreign country. A team already assembled to fight back. My wife did not just die for me. She armed me from the grave. Eleanor pulled into the Cole Harbor parking garage and turned off the engine. There is one more thing, she said. Something Catherine made me promise to tell you only in person. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. Catherine's handwriting on the front for Robert. When you are ready to end this. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a name and phone number. Diana Rourke, FBI Financial Crimes Division, and beneath it, in Catherine's precise script, she is expecting your call. I gave her everything 18 months ago. Victoria's arrest warrant is already written. All you have to do is sign the complaint. I stared at those words. Catherine had not just gathered evidence. She had built the entire FBI case. She had handed the federal government everything they needed to arrest our daughter, then waited. Waited for Victoria to make her move. Waited for me to survive long enough to trigger the trap. My wife had been dead for 3 weeks, but she was still fighting, still protecting me, still dismantling Victoria piece by piece from beyond the grave. All I had to do was make one phone call. The Cole Harbor condo was worth $4 million. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Modern furniture, original art on the walls, a kitchen that had never been used. Catherine had bought it 18 months ago without telling me. She had decorated it for a husband she knew might arrive alone. I stood in the doorway of my wife's final gift, and I wept. Eleanor gave me a moment. Then she spread documents across the dining table and began walking me through 18 months of Catherine's secret war. The foundation was money I never knew existed. Catherine's father had left her $12 million in 2015. Victoria never knew. Catherine had kept it separate, never touched it publicly. That was the seed money for everything that followed. She never told me about the inheritance, I said. She could not, Eleanor replied. Victoria was already monitoring your accounts by then. Catherine needed capital Victoria could not trace. Over 22 months, Catherine had converted legitimate Sullivan assets. Her shares, her properties, her retirement accounts. Everything moved here to Canada. Legally, transparently, if anyone had thought to look in the right country. Do you understand what my wife did? She watched her daughter plan murder. She gathered evidence, moved money, built a fortress in another country, all while cooking family dinners and attending company meetings. For 18 months, Catherine played the victim while constructing Victoria's destruction. Every spreadsheet was a weapon. Every wire transfer was a bullet. My wife waged a secret war and won it from the grave. And Sullivan Industries, I asked. Eleanor's smile was thin and sharp. $83 million in debt with an IRS audit scheduled in 2 weeks. Catherine drained it legally before Victoria could steal it. Your daughter murdered her mother for a company that is worth less than nothing. Victoria thought she was a predator. She thought she was smarter than everyone. Her mother, her father, her brother. She murdered her way to the throne of Sullivan Industries. And when she sat down, she discovered the throne was made of quicksand. Catherine had spent 18 months hollowing out the empire, leaving only a beautiful facade over a pit of debt. Victoria did not claim a kingdom. She fell into a trap. Catherine built Victoria's prison before Victoria even committed the crime, I said. Eleanor nodded. Your wife was brilliant and patient and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting you. She handed me the final document, a single page dated 2 days before Catherine's death, her handwriting shaking slightly but clear. To my husband, Robert. If you are reading this, I am gone. Victoria killed me and probably Michael too. I am sorry I could not tell you. I am sorry I could not save myself. But I could save you. Everything is in place. The FBI has the evidence. You have the money. All that is left is justice. Call Diana Rourke. Tell her you are ready. And Robert, do not feel guilty for destroying Victoria. She stopped being our daughter the day she decided to kill us. Finish what I started. I love you. Always. Catherine. I held my wife's last words in my hands. Rain streaked the windows behind me. The harbor lights twinkled through the glass like stars reflected in dark water. Catherine had written this letter knowing she might die, knowing Victoria might kill her. And still she had planned. Still she had prepared. Still she had loved me enough to build me a life from the wreckage of her own death. I looked at the phone number for Diana Rourke. I looked at Catherine's letter. I looked at the city lights of Vancouver, the place my wife had chosen for my second chance. I made my decision. Agent Diana Rourke appeared on Eleanor's laptop screen at exactly 6 p.m. Pacific time. 42 years old, FBI Sloan. Financial Crimes Division out of Phoenix, with cropped brown hair and eyes that had seen every kind of corporate crime. She spoke with the measured precision of someone who built cases brick by brick and never lost in court. This was the woman Catherine had trusted with Victoria's destruction. Mr. Sullivan, she said. Your wife contacted my office 4 months before she died. I have been waiting for this call ever since. 4 months. Not 18. Catherine had only gone to the FBI after exhausting other options. The FBI connection was her last resort, not her first plan. Diana explained what Catherine had provided: financial records, communication logs, preliminary evidence of the embezzlement scheme. But the FBI could not move without a formal complainant. Catherine knew she might die before she could file, so she arranged for me to be that complainant, giving the FBI everything they needed while ensuring I would be the one to trigger the investigation. I have additional evidence, I told her. Everything from the cottage. The SD card with the videos, Michael's final message, all of it. Courier it to our Phoenix office tomorrow, Diana said. Forensic analysis takes 48 hours, maybe less if I push. Once we verify authenticity, we move immediately. Let me tell you about waiting for justice. It is not dramatic. It is not cinematic. It is sitting in a luxury condo, watching rain hit windows, while your daughter, the one who murdered your wife and son, goes about her day 3,000 miles away, unaware that her life is about to end. 48 hours of silence. 48 hours of checking your phone every 30 seconds. 48 hours of wondering if something will go wrong at the last moment. The rain never stopped. Vancouver wept for 2 days straight, while I watched the harbor and waited for my daughter's world to end. Eleanor stayed nearby handling legal preparations. I barely ate. I did not sleep. I watched news channels for any sign that Victoria suspected what was coming. Then at 4:47 p.m. on the second day, Diana Rourke called. Mr. Sullivan, forensics verified everything. The evidence is authentic, comprehensive, and damning. I held my breath. Warrant issued 30 minutes ago for Victoria Sullivan Hartley. Charges include embezzlement, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and 2 counts of first-degree murder. Arrest team deploys within 24 hours. 2 counts of first-degree murder. The FBI had enough evidence to prove Victoria not only planned the murders, but executed them. This was not just financial crimes anymore. Victoria faced life in prison without parole. When Diana said warrant issued, I sat down on the floor of that expensive condo and put my head in my hands. Not crying, not celebrating, just breathing. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without fear. Catherine had done it. From beyond the grave, my wife had destroyed our daughter. All I had done was survive long enough to pull the trigger. I hung up and allowed myself to feel hope for the first time since Catherine's funeral. 24 hours. Victoria would be in handcuffs within 24 hours. Then Eleanor's phone rang. Her face went pale as she listened. She hung up without speaking and turned to me with an expression I could not read. "Robert," she said slowly, "I just got a call from my contact at Vancouver PD. They received an inquiry this morning from Phoenix Police. Someone filed a missing persons report claiming you disappeared from a psychiatric facility and may be dangerous." The hope drained from my body like water from a broken vessel. Victoria knew I was alive, and she was trying to have me committed before I could testify. November 15th, 2018, 5:47 a.m. Phoenix time. I watched my daughter get arrested on live television. The FBI had tipped off the media, Diana's idea to control the narrative before Victoria's lawyers could spin it. I stood in Eleanor's Cole Harbor condo 3,000 miles away and watched Victoria Sullivan Hartley walk out of her Scottsdale mansion in handcuffs. There she was, my daughter, my firstborn, the girl who used to fall asleep in my arms, walking out of her stolen mansion surrounded by FBI agents. Her mask cracked on live television. For one unguarded moment, the cameras caught something real behind her eyes. Not fear, not remorse. Rage. Pure, burning rage at being outsmarted by her dead mother. Marcus was arrested 20 minutes later in Scottsdale. Eleanor confirmed both were in federal custody. The news anchors described the charges: embezzlement, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and 2 counts of first-degree murder. I held my father's Seiko watch and watched my daughter get arrested on television. The same hand that once held hers as she learned to walk now gripped the watch face hard enough to leave marks. 40 years. I spent 40 years loving Victoria, protecting her, building a legacy for her. And she spent those 40 years becoming something I could not recognize. When did I lose her? Was she ever really mine? It does not feel like victory, I told Eleanor. It feels like the end of everything. 3 days later, Victoria struck back. Her legal team produced a newly discovered document, a forged contract from 2008, allegedly showing I had orchestrated the embezzlement scheme and set up Victoria to take the fall. The document claimed I planned to flee the country with company funds and frame my own daughter. Victoria's lawyers filed for immediate dismissal, arguing I was the true criminal, and Victoria was being persecuted by her mentally unstable father. You think the arrest is the end? You think handcuffs mean justice is served? Victoria's lawyers filed their counterattack 3 days later. Suddenly, I was the criminal, a mentally unstable old man who had framed his own daughter. The same news anchors who called Victoria a monster were now questioning my sanity. That is what money buys you. Not innocence. Doubt. And doubt is almost as good. Eleanor read me the legal filing. She is claiming you masterminded everything. A forged contract dated 2008, your signature on documents authorizing shell company creation. I have never seen those documents, I said. They are fabricated. Of course they are. But they are good forgeries. This will take time to disprove. Time she is using to poison the jury pool. Even from jail, Victoria was still fighting, still dangerous, still capable of manipulation. Eleanor studied the forged documents for hours, looking for cracks. Then she found one. "Robert," she said, pointing at the 2008 contract's notary seal. "This notary, Harold Finch. He died in 2006, 2 years before this document was supposedly signed." She looked up with a predator's smile. "Victoria's forgery has a fatal flaw. We can prove it is fake. But we need someone who knew the notary. Someone who can testify about the timeline." She pulled out her phone. "I am calling your brother James." He worked with Finch at Sullivan Industries. If he will testify, Victoria's entire defense collapses. James, the brother I had wronged 8 years ago, the brother who had helped me escape to Phoenix. Now Eleanor wanted him to testify against his niece, to help put Victoria in prison for life. The destruction of my family was almost complete. But there was one more piece to fall. March 15th, 2019. Federal Courthouse, Phoenix. I sat 15 feet from my daughter for the first time since she tried to have me killed. Victoria wore a gray Armani suit. Her armor, her costume of respectability. She never once looked at me. Not during jury selection, not during opening statements, not when the prosecution called my name. James had testified the day before. He told the jury about Harold Finch, the notary who died in 2006, 2 years before the forged contract was supposedly signed. Chemical analysis proved the ink was manufactured in 2018. Victoria's forgery collapsed in a single afternoon. Now it was my turn. Have you ever testified against your own child? Have you ever sat in a witness box, raised your hand, sworn to tell the truth, and then described how your daughter murdered your wife and son? I have. I looked at the jury, 12 strangers who would decide my daughter's fate, and I told them everything. Every document, every video, every lie. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just the hollow knowledge that I was doing what had to be done. The prosecutor walked me through the evidence methodically. Financial records, shell companies, wire transfers, then the videos. Victoria's face on screen discussing how to eliminate the old problem. Her browser history showing brake sabotage searches. Phone recordings of her ordering the arrangement. Victoria watched it all without expression. She still would not look at me. On day 3, the prosecution played Michael's final message. When my son's voice filled that courtroom, time stopped. My 28-year-old son dead for 5 months, speaking to a room full of strangers about why his sister killed him. Dad, if you are hearing this, Mom and I did not make it. Victoria killed us. She killed us because we found out what she did, and we tried to protect you. I gripped the witness box rail until my knuckles turned white. I am not afraid, Dad. I am proud. Mom and I chose this. We chose to protect you. The courtroom was silent except for my son's voice. Juror number 4 wiped her eyes. Juror number 9, a retired Marine, had tears streaming down his face, and Victoria sat frozen listening to her brother explain why she murdered him. Her face showed nothing. But beneath the defense table, her hands were shaking. The brother she killed was testifying against her from beyond the grave. Even Victoria's control could not fully mask the impact. No further questions, Your Honor, the prosecutor said. The prosecution rested. I thought it was over. I thought the evidence had spoken. I thought Michael's voice had sealed Victoria's fate. Then Victoria's defense team called their final witness. Diana Rourke's face went pale when she heard the name. Marcus Hartley, Victoria's husband, her co-conspirator. The man who had planned murders with her on video. He walked to the stand in an orange jumpsuit, took the oath, looked directly at Victoria for the first time since his arrest. I have agreed to testify for the defense, he said, because Victoria Sullivan Hartley is innocent. I acted alone. Every crime, the embezzlement, the murders, was my decision. She knew nothing. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Diana was on her feet, objecting, but I watched Victoria's face. Her expression showed nothing, but her eyes blazed with triumph. She had flipped her own husband. Even facing life in prison, Marcus was taking the fall for her. Whatever she had promised him, whatever she had threatened, it had worked. Victoria still had moves left, and she had just played her best one. The prosecution destroyed Marcus in 45 minutes. Diana Rourke played the murder planning videos where Victoria gave explicit orders while Marcus nodded and took notes. She showed wire transfers from Victoria's personal account to shell companies. She presented emails discussing eliminating the problem. Marcus's confession collapsed under cross-examination, and the jury saw a desperate man lying to save a wife who had manipulated him into taking the fall. Victoria's final gambit became additional evidence of her sociopathy. The jury retired to deliberate at 11 in the morning on a Tuesday. I sat in the courthouse gallery, unable to eat, barely able to breathe. The wooden bench felt like stone beneath me. James arrived at noon and sat beside me without speaking. The courtroom smelled of old wood and nervous sweat, the air stale from too many bodies in a closed space. At 3 o'clock, Maria Gonzalez walked through the gallery doors. She had driven from Nevada after I called weeks ago to thank her. She squeezed my hand once and sat on my other side. We waited. The jury deliberated for 3 full days, 72 hours of examining 87 documents, 94 video files, and 47 minutes of Michael's testimony from beyond the grave. 72 hours of dissecting my daughter's crimes while I sat in that courthouse hallway, unable to leave, unable to eat, barely able to breathe. James brought coffee. Maria brought food I could not swallow. Eleanor checked in twice daily with updates that were never updates. The jury is still deliberating, that is all anyone could say. Let me tell you what waiting for a verdict feels like when your daughter is the defendant. You do not pray for conviction. You cannot. Some part of you, the part that held her as a baby, that cheered at her graduation, that walked her down the aisle, still hopes for a miracle. Still hopes there has been a mistake. Still hopes you will wake up, and none of this will be real. But you do not wake up. The hours stretch into days, and you sit in that courthouse hallway watching other families come and go. Other verdicts delivered, other lives decided while yours hangs in limbo. On the third evening at 7:03 p.m., the bailiff finally announced the jury's return. All rise. The words echoed through the chamber. I gripped the bench until my knuckles whitened my father's Seiko watch, pressing cold against my wrist. The foreperson stood a retired accountant in a brown suit, holding a folded piece of paper. Victoria rose at the defense table, her gray suit pressed, and perfect her posture that of a CEO awaiting quarterly results. Guilty on the charge of embezzlement. Guilty on the charge of wire fraud. Guilty on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder. Those words should have felt like victory. Catherine and Michael were avenged. Justice was served. But I sat in that gallery and felt nothing, just a vast, cold emptiness where my family used to be. A wife, a son, a daughter, all gone. The guilty verdict did not restore any of them. It just confirmed that everything I had built in 63 years had been burned to ash by my own child. Guilty on 2 counts of murder in the first degree. The gallery erupted in whispers. A reporter typed furiously on her phone. James whispered beside me, "It is over, Robert. It is finally over." I shook my head. No. Nothing will ever bring them back. I watched Victoria's face as the verdict was read. No tears, no reaction, no humanity. Just stone-cold emptiness. The woman in that gray suit was not Victoria. Victoria died years ago, if she ever existed at all. This was the thing that replaced her. As the bailiffs moved to take her into custody, she finally turned and looked at me. Our eyes met for the first time since the trial began. And she smiled. Not a broken smile. Not a defeated smile. A knowing smile, the smile of someone who still has cards to play. Then she mouthed 2 words, silent and clear. Not over. The bailiffs clicked handcuffs around her wrists, the sound of metal on metal filling the courtroom. They led her away, and I understood. The verdict did not break her. Prison would not break her. Victoria was already planning her appeal, already scheming her next move. My daughter would fight until her last breath. And so would I. April 3rd, 2019, Federal Courthouse, Phoenix. The sentencing hearing began at 9 a.m. Diana Rourke had explained to me the night before why Victoria's case remained in federal court, despite the murder charges. The embezzlement and wire fraud crossed state lines. The conspiracy involved interstate communication and financial transfers. And under federal RICO statutes, the murders were part of a continuing criminal enterprise. Victoria would be sentenced in federal court under federal guidelines for all charges together. The judge's voice echoed through the silent courtroom. Victoria Sullivan Hartley, I hereby sentence you to 45 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 30 years. 45 years. My daughter would be 83 before she could walk free if she lived that long. I should have felt something. Relief. Justice. Closure. Instead, I felt only the hollow weight of everything we had all lost. Victoria's mouthed threat from 2 weeks ago still rang in my ears. Not over. She had meant it. The judge continued speaking about the profound betrayal of family trust, about the calculated murder of 2 innocent people, about the systematic theft that had destroyed a company and countless livelihoods. I gripped the wooden bench beneath me, the polished surface cold against my palms. Victoria's eyes found mine as the sentence landed. Rage first pure and hot, flickering across her features like lightning. Then nothing. Complete emptiness. Like watching a light go out. She was not devastated. She was calculating. Even facing 45 years, my daughter remained unbroken. Marcus Hartley received 25 years as an accomplice. He wept. He apologized to the court, to me, to anyone who would listen. Victoria never made a sound. She stood motionless in her gray suit while bailiffs approached with handcuffs. The courthouse air smelled of old wood and nervous sweat, and I tasted nothing. I had not eaten in 2 days. Do you know what it feels like to watch your child receive a 45-year sentence? There is no guidebook, no support group, no card that says, sorry, your daughter is a convicted murderer. I sat in that courtroom and watched Victoria's life end, not physically, but in every way that matters. And I felt like I was attending a third funeral. 6 weeks later, I had returned to Vancouver. Rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Cole Harbour condo, and I sat with a cup of coffee gone cold in my hands. The television played news coverage of Victoria's appeal. Some outlets had begun questioning my role. A news anchor's voice filled the room. Questions remain about Robert Sullivan's involvement. Some analysts suggest evidence may have been manufactured. I turned off the television and stared at the gray sky. Eleanor Hartwell arrived that afternoon with her phone clutched tight. She played me a voicemail that had come to her office line. The voice was disguised mechanical, but the words were clear. Robert Sullivan will not see Christmas. Tell him his daughter sends her love. My blood went cold. The taste of copper flooded my mouth. You think prison stops someone like Victoria? You think bars and guards mean anything to a woman who murdered her own mother and brother? Within 6 weeks, she had built a network inside those walls. She had found people who would threaten, manipulate, and kill for her. Prison did not contain my daughter. It just gave her a different kingdom to rule. I called Diana Rourke immediately. She traced the call within hours. The call originated inside the federal detention facility, she said. She has built a network, Robert. Prison has not contained her. I gripped my father's Seiko watch, feeling its weight against my wrist. I survived her once, I told Diana. I will survive her again. Diana called the next morning with worse news. We identified the person who made the threat, she said. An inmate named Karen Voss. She says Victoria paid her not with money, but with information. My hands trembled. What information? Diana paused. The location of your Cole Harbour condo, your daily routine, the names of everyone who helped you escape Nevada. Victoria had spent 6 weeks gathering intelligence on everyone I loved. And now she was selling that information to anyone willing to do her bidding. Robert, Diana said quietly, you need to disappear again. She is not finished with you. I did not run. Two FBI agents moved into the condo across the hall. Their names were Martinez and Dawson, and they worked 12-hour shifts watching my door, my building, my life. Diana Rourke had convinced the Bureau that I was a material witness under active threat. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. The news came in pieces over the following weeks. Forensic experts had examined Victoria's latest forged document, a 2009 contract. The ink analysis was definitive. Manufactured in 2018, her appeal had lost its primary evidence. Eleanor called the same afternoon. Vancouver police arrested two men that morning. They had been watching my building for 3 weeks, both connected to inmates in Victoria's facility. She really built a network that fast, I said to Diana. She had money hidden, Diana replied. Accounts we never found. She has been paying people since the day she was arrested. But we are dismantling it, Robert. Piece by piece. I stood at my window, watching the harbor coffee growing cold. For the first time, I felt the tide turning. Victoria had reached out from prison, and the world had pushed back. Let me tell you what safety feels like after months of terror. It feels like sleeping without checking the door. It feels like drinking coffee by the window without scanning for threats. It feels like breathing without wondering if this breath might be your last. 2 FBI agents gave me something Victoria had stolen. Peace. Not happiness, but peace. June arrived with summer, and one evening my doorbell rang. I checked the monitor and felt my heart stop. James stood in the hallway, my younger brother, older and grayer than I remembered. 8 years had passed since we last spoke. A business disagreement had driven us apart, a rift Victoria had widened with lies. I opened the door. James stood carrying 8 years of guilt. Robert, he said, voice cracking. I should have come sooner. I believed them. When Victoria called after Catherine died, she said you were having a breakdown. She said you might hurt yourself. I believed my niece over my brother. She fooled everyone, James. Even Catherine did not see it until too late. I am so sorry. For the last 8 years. For everything. You are here now. That is what matters. I should have been angry. I should have demanded explanations. Instead, I pulled him into my arms and held on. He felt older, frailer than I remembered. The Vancouver sea air drifted through the door, and I tasted salt. We had lost so much time. But we were still here. Still family. The only family I had left. That evening, we sat on the balcony watching harbor lights. Whiskey warmed my chest. For hours, we talked about Catherine and Michael, about wasted years. Then James set down his glass. Robert, there is something else. Something I should have told you years ago. He stared at the water, unable to meet my eyes. Before Catherine contacted me about the escape plan, Victoria called me, 6 months before the murders. My hand tightened on the railing. She asked questions about your health, your mental state, your will. She was planning this, Robert. Planning everything at least 6 months before Catherine found the embezzlement. Your daughter started plotting your death before she even needed to. I did not sleep that night. James's revelation about Victoria's 6-month head start on murder kept echoing in my skull. But the next morning brought something unexpected. Diana Rourke's voice was tight with controlled excitement. Robert Marcus Hartley wants to talk. He is offering to testify against Victoria in exchange for a reduced sentence. I gripped the phone harder. He already testified for her. He confessed to everything. That was before he learned Victoria tried to have him killed in prison, Diana said. Someone put ground glass in his food last week. He nearly died. Now he wants revenge. Victoria had tried to murder her own husband. The man who committed perjury to protect her. The man who faced additional prison time for her lies. When he became inconvenient, she tried to kill him too. Marcus kept records, Diana continued. Payments to an outside contractor. Communications about the car. He never fully trusted Victoria. He was building leverage in case she turned on him. Physical evidence does not lie, and Marcus has plenty of it. Let me tell you about betrayal. Victoria betrayed her mother, her brother, her father. She betrayed the company her family built. And when Marcus became inconvenient, she tried to eliminate him. Ground glass in his food. That is who my daughter is. That is who she always was. Everyone who ever loved her was just another tool to be used and discarded. July 15th, 2019. I sat in Phoenix's federal appellate court, watching 3 judges preside over Victoria's appeal hearing. The courtroom smelled of air conditioning and fear. Marcus Hartley took the stand, his face pale and gaunt from weeks of recovery. Under oath, he told the truth. Victoria contacted a professional through encrypted channels. She paid $200,000 to sabotage the brake lines. I have the wire transfers. I have the communications. I have a recording of her saying, and I quote, "Make sure it looks like an accident." The courtroom went silent. I tasted copper in my dry mouth. Then Victoria exploded. Her scream was not human. It was feral, something that had worn a mask for 40 years, and finally tore it off. "You lying bastard," she shrieked. "I will kill you. I will kill you myself." Guards wrestled her down while she thrashed and screamed death threats. Judges banged gavels. Lawyers scrambled backward. I sat frozen, watching my daughter become a monster in front of the entire world. And I felt nothing but relief that everyone could finally see what I had seen. The appeal was denied that same day. Victoria's sentence stood. 45 years, no parole for 30. But as guards dragged her from the courtroom, she twisted in their grip and found my eyes. Her voice cut through the chaos, cold and clear despite her rage. "You think this is over? I have people everywhere. Maria Gonzalez, the nurse who helped you. I know where she lives. I know where her grandchildren go to school. You took everything from me, Daddy. Now I am going to take everything from you." One person at a time. The guards hauled her through the doors, but her words stayed behind. Maria, the woman who had saved my life with nothing but blankets and kindness and a borrowed car. She had asked nothing in return, except that I survive. Now my daughter was going to destroy her as punishment for helping me. I was moving before the courtroom doors closed. Diana caught my arm. "Robert, we have agents en route." But I could not wait. Maria Gonzalez had given me everything when I had nothing. Now Victoria's hatred was reaching across prison walls to punish her for that kindness. I had Maria's address. I had sent her money months ago. Now I was racing to make sure she lived long enough to spend it. Maria Gonzalez was safe. FBI agents reached her before anyone else did, relocating her and her family to a protected location within 6 hours of Victoria's threat. I paid for everything. New identities, new home, new life. It was the least I could do for the woman who had saved mine. Catherine's $52 million finally served a purpose I could feel proud of. But Victoria was not finished fighting. She never would be. In August 2019, I sat in Phoenix's federal appellate court one final time. Based on Marcus's testimony and the murder-for-hire evidence, prosecutors had filed additional charges. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber. Given the additional evidence of premeditated murder-for-hire, this court sentences Victoria Sullivan Hartley to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Victoria heard her life sentence with no expression, no rage, no tears, just empty eyes staring at nothing. I wondered if she was already planning her next move. Do you know what life without parole means? It means Victoria will wake up every morning in a cell until the day she dies. No release date, no hope, no future. For most people, that sentence would bring despair. For Victoria, it brought clarity. She had nothing left to lose. and someone with nothing to lose is the most dangerous person alive. September proved me right. Victoria faked a medical emergency. Guards found her unconscious in her cell with apparent self-harm injuries. When they rushed her to the prison hospital, she attacked a guard with a concealed blade, stole his uniform, and made it 50 yards before being recaptured. Diana called with the news. She nearly made it. Faked unconsciousness attacked when they moved her. Now she is in maximum security. Solitary confinement. No more networks, no more contacts. A week later, Diana called again. Her voice was strange. "Robert, there is something else. Victoria has formally requested a visitation. She wants to see you. She says she has something to tell you. Something about Catherine. Something you do not know. Let me ask you something. If the person who murdered your wife and son, your own daughter, requested to see you from prison claiming she had secrets about your dead wife, would you go? Would you give her that power? Would you sit across from the monster who destroyed your family and let her speak? I did not know the answer. Part of me wanted to refuse to deny her anything. But another part, the part that still remembered Catherine's face, needed to know what Victoria knew. I flew to Arizona 3 days later. Maximum security visitation. Bulletproof glass-monitored phones, armed guards at every door. The air smelled of disinfectant and recycled fear. Victoria was waiting when I arrived. She looked older, thinner, paler, the gray jumpsuit hanging loose on her frame. But her eyes were the same. Cold, calculating, patient. She picked up the phone on her side of the glass and waited for me to do the same. The receiver was cold against my ear. "Hello, Daddy," she said. "Thank you for coming. I was not sure you would." I said nothing, just waited. My mouth was dry, bitter with the coffee I had drunk that morning. Her smile was small, knowing. "I want to tell you about the night Mom died, about what really happened, about the phone call she made to me 30 minutes before the crash." My blood froze. "She called you?" Victoria nodded slowly. "She called from Michael's phone. Check the records if you do not believe me. October 15th, 2018, 7:47 p.m., 32 minutes before the accident." She leaned closer to the glass, her breath fogging the barrier between us. "Do you want to know what she said, Daddy? Do you want to know why your perfect wife called the daughter she knew was going to kill her? Catherine never called Victoria. I checked the phone records myself. Diana helped me access them within 48 hours. October 15th, 2018. No call to Victoria. No call from Michael's phone. Victoria had lied about the final conversation, about Catherine's secret, about everything. She had wanted to see me just to twist the knife one more time. But I went back anyway, because I needed to hear the truth from her own mouth. Not about Catherine, about herself. Victoria sat behind the glass partition, hollow-eyed and shackled. The failed escape attempt had cost her what little privilege she had. The visiting room smelled of disinfectant and recycled air. I picked up the phone. The plastic was cold against my ear. "There was no phone call," I said. "Catherine never contacted you. You made the whole thing up." Victoria laughed. The sound echoed off the concrete walls. "Of course I did. I wanted to see if you would come. You did. Even now, Daddy, I can still make you dance." Why, I asked. Why any of this? The money. The company you really do not understand. Do you? Her voice was flat empty. "I have been planning this for 5 years. Every detail, every step. The embezzlement was just the beginning. I needed capital. I needed leverage. And I needed everyone to trust me completely before I made my move. 5 years. My daughter spent 5 years planning to murder her mother and brother. 5 years of family dinners and holiday gatherings and birthday celebrations, all while she was designing our destruction. I sat across from her and tried to find the child I had raised. The little girl who had held my hand, the teenager who had asked me to teach her to drive. She was not there. Maybe she had never been there. I planned everything, Victoria continued. The shell companies, the fake documents, the brake sabotage. I researched every method. I tested every angle. And when Mom started getting suspicious, I accelerated the timeline. I knew she was gathering evidence. I knew Michael was helping her. So I eliminated them before they could expose me. Do you regret it? I asked. Any of it, your mother, your brother, everything you destroyed. Victoria smiled, the cruelest smile I had ever seen. I regret getting caught. That is all. 4 words. That was all she had to offer. No remorse for Catherine, who had loved her despite everything. No grief for Michael. No acknowledgement that she had destroyed a family that would have done anything for her. Just regret at being caught. I looked at my daughter through that bulletproof glass and understood finally that she had never loved any of us. We were just obstacles. I stood to leave. There was nothing more to say. Victoria would rot in that cell until she died, and I would never see her again. But as I turned toward the door, she spoke one last time. Daddy. I stopped but did not turn around. Mom knew, Victoria said. At the end, she figured out my plan before I was ready to execute it. That is why she built all those escape routes for you. But she did not run. Do you know why I turned? Victoria's smile made bile rise in my throat. She stayed because she thought she could save me. She thought if she just gathered enough evidence, she could get me help instead of prison, therapy instead of punishment. Even at the end, she was trying to protect her monster daughter. Victoria laughed. The sound was inhuman. She died still loving me. Is that not the saddest thing you have ever heard? I walked out of that prison carrying Victoria's final words, like stones in my chest. Catherine stayed to save her. Catherine died still loving the monster who killed her. For weeks, I could not reconcile it. Then December came, and Eleanor arrived at the Cole Harbor condo with a small package in her hands. This was in Catherine's safe deposit box, she said. She left instructions. Give this to Robert 1 year after Victoria's sentencing, if he survived. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten note in Catherine's perfect script. My dearest Robert, I recorded these for you. Watch them when you are ready to understand everything. I love you. Always. Catherine. I plugged the drive into my laptop and pressed play. Catherine's face filled the screen. Alive. Beautiful. Speaking to me from beyond the grave. Robert, if you are watching this, I did not survive. I need you to understand. I knew about Victoria long before the embezzlement. I spent years watching her, hoping she would change. Every time I found another lie, another manipulation, I told myself it was the last one. That she would get better. That I could save her. I was wrong. By the time I found the embezzlement, I knew the truth. Victoria was not broken. She was not sick. She was simply empty, and she was going to destroy us all. I watched my wife on that screen and understood everything. Catherine had carried this burden alone for years. She had watched Victoria become a monster and never told me because she was trying to protect us both. She spent years hoping while secretly building an ark for the flood she knew was coming. And she never complained, never broke, never asked for help. The second video showed Catherine and Michael together. My son's face filled the screen and I tasted salt as tears rolled down my cheeks. Dad, if you are watching this, Mom and I did not make it. I want you to know I chose this. Mom gave me the option to run. I could have gone to Canada, waited for you there, but I could not leave her alone against Victoria. Do you understand what Michael did? My son was 28 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. Catherine gave him an escape route. He could have flown to safety, and he refused. "I chose to stay," Michael said. "If staying means Dad lives, I will stay." I did not know for certain Victoria would do what she did. Part of me hoped she would back down at the last moment, that she would see reason. But I could not risk your life on that hope. So I stayed. I gathered evidence. I became Mom's partner in this. Catherine leaned into frame beside Michael, her hand on his shoulder. Her voice was steady, proud. "He was your shield, Robert. Michael stood between you and Victoria, knowing what it might cost. He did not have to. He chose to. That is the kind of man our son became." The video continued with both of them explaining the escape plan, the hidden money, the FBI contact. But I could barely focus. My son had hoped Victoria would not kill them. He had stayed anyway. He had chosen his father's life over his own survival, knowing he might be making the biggest mistake of his life. "I am not a hero, Dad," Michael said near the end. "I am just your son. And protecting you is what sons do. I love you. This is not your fault. None of it. Live. Survive. Be happy. That is all I want." The video ended. I sat in darkness holding my father's Seiko watch so tightly the edges cut into my palm. Catherine and Michael had died for me. Not by accident, by choice. They had seen the monster coming and placed themselves between her and me. I owed them more than grief. I owed them a legacy. I picked up my phone and called Eleanor. "The $52 million Catherine left me," I said. "I want to use it. All of it. I want to build something. A foundation. For families destroyed by people like Victoria. For survivors like me." Eleanor was quiet. Then she asked what I wanted to call it. "The Catherine and Michael Sullivan Foundation. For those who stay when they could run." The Catherine and Michael Sullivan Foundation was established in January 2020. But before we could launch, James found me on the balcony at midnight, staring at the harbor lights. He did not speak at first, just stood beside me, two brothers who had lost so much finally standing together again. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Catherine gave this to me 2 years ago," he said. "She made me promise to give it to you only after everything was over, only when you were ready." I recognized her handwriting on the front, just my name, Robert. 2 years. Catherine had entrusted this letter to James 2 years before she died. Even her final words of love had been carefully timed, given only when I would be strong enough to receive them. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single piece of cream-colored stationery, the kind Catherine used for important occasions. Her handwriting filled just 3 lines, 3 sentences that would stay with me for the rest of my life. "Robert, you are the strongest man I have ever known, even if you never believed it yourself. I have never been happier than the 34 years I spent as your wife. Live the rest of your life as if I am still beside you, because I am." I read those 3 sentences 7 times that night. Each time I found something new, a turn of phrase, a memory embedded in her words, a piece of her I could still hold on to. Catherine had reduced a lifetime of love into 3 perfect sentences. No wasted words, no unnecessary explanations. Just the essence of everything we had been to each other. I whispered her final words into the Vancouver night and swore I felt her hand on my shoulder. Not a ghost, not imagination, just love transcending everything Victoria tried to destroy. "I will, Catherine," I whispered. "I promise. I will." The foundation launched that January. We provided legal aid, counseling services, and emergency funds to families victimized by financial crimes and domestic predators. Maria Gonzalez ran outreach. Eleanor handled legal structure. James served on the board. By 2021, we had 12 staff members and had helped over 200 families rebuild their lives. Do you want to know what redemption looks like? It looks like Maria, the nurse who saved me with blankets and kindness, now helping families who have nowhere else to turn. It looks like James, the brother I pushed away for 8 years, rebuilding what was broken. It looks like 200 families who might have lost everything now standing because Catherine and Michael's sacrifice gave them somewhere to fall. Every family saved was a defeat for Victoria. The Sullivan name now stood for healing instead of betrayal. Every person we helped proved that love is stronger than hate. April 2022. I walked through the foundation offices past photos of Catherine and Michael on every wall, past the staff who had become family, past everything we had built from ashes. The work was not just a memorial. It was a living testament to the people who had chosen love over fear, sacrifice over survival. Catherine's 3 sentences guided everything we did. You are the strongest man I have ever known. I had not felt strong standing at her grave, or fleeing through the desert, or watching my daughter's trial. But I felt it now. In the families we saved, in the lives we rebuilt, in the foundation that turned tragedy into hope. I have never been happier than the 34 years I spent as your wife. Neither had I. And no amount of Victoria's hatred could erase those decades of joy. Live the rest of your life as if I am still beside you because I am. And she was. In every decision I made, in every family we helped, in every moment I chose to build instead of destroy. Catherine was there. Always. I flew to Arizona. I sat in the prison waiting room for 3 hours, turning Victoria's letter over in my hands, preparing words I might never say. When the guard finally came, he told me Victoria had refused to see me. She had changed her mind. Whether from shame, spite, or inability to face forgiveness, I would never know. I left anyway. I left a letter with the warden sealed in an envelope with her name on it. 8 words. I forgive you. Not for you. For me. I walked out of that prison and did not look back. Victoria would die there alone with her choices, but I would not die with her. I had people who loved me. I had work that mattered. I had a life to live. Let me tell you about forgiveness. It is not absolution. It is not forgetting. It is not saying what happened was acceptable. Forgiveness is putting down a weight you have been carrying so long you forgot what it felt like to stand straight. Victoria murdered my wife and son. I will never forget that. I will never stop grieving, but I will not carry hatred into my grave. Catherine would not have wanted that. Michael would not have wanted that. And neither do I. Back in Vancouver, spring rain fell soft on the rooftop garden. I knelt in the soil and planted the 26th silver sage, its leaves fragrant in the wet air. A small bronze plaque waited beside it. For Victoria. May you find peace. James stood beside me watching. 26 sages, he said. 1 for each year. 1 for each year she was still capable of being saved, I replied. Before whatever broke inside her broke for good. Do you really believe that she could have been saved? No. But Catherine believed it. And this is not for Victoria. It is for the daughter Catherine loved. The one who existed before the monster. The sun touched the water, and for a moment the whole harbor turned to gold. I thought about Catherine, her smile, her strength, her impossible love for a daughter who could not love her back. I thought about Michael, his choice to stay, his sacrifice, his final words. This is not your fault. I thought about Victoria. The child she had been, the monster, she became the mystery of how one becomes the other. And I let it all go. Not because the pain was gone, but because I had finally learned to live with it. What now? James asked. Now we live. We help people. We honor Catherine and Michael every single day. And we let the past stay in the past. James put his hand on my shoulder as the last light faded. "What are you thinking about?" I looked at the 26 silver sage plants, their leaves catching the dying light, and I smiled. "I am thinking about tomorrow. The foundation has a new family coming in. Mother and 2 kids escaped from a situation like ours. They need help." James nodded. "Then we helped them." "Yes, we helped them." The harbor lights began to flicker on one by one across the water. Behind me was everything I had lost. Ahead of me was everything I could still build. I turned my back on the sunset and walked inside. There was work to do. There was always work to do. And that I had finally learned was not a burden. It was a gift. Catherine's gift. Michael's gift. The gift of continuing. The gift of being alive when I could so easily have been dead. I was Robert Sullivan. I was 64 years old. I was scarred but whole. And my story was not over. It was just beginning again. Looking back, this family story changed the man I once was. I believed blood alone guaranteed loyalty. I was wrong. If you learn anything from my journey, let it be this: do not ignore warning signs even inside your own family story. Love your children, protect your family, but never close your eyes to manipulation or cruelty. My pain became a dad revenge path I never wanted yet. It forced me to defend the people who could no longer defend themselves. This family story taught me that strength is not vengeance alone. It is choosing to rebuild after everything collapses. My dad revenge was not about hatred. It was about justice, survival, and protecting the innocent. I believe God allowed me to survive so that something meaningful could grow from the ashes. And in the end, my dad revenge became a mission to help others escape the kind of darkness that destroyed my home. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Robert's position facing betrayal from your own child? I would truly value hearing your perspective. If this story moved, you consider subscribing so you don't miss future videos. A gentle note: although inspired by themes like family betrayal and financial crime, some elements have been dramatized for storytelling. If this narrative isn't your style, feel free to explore other videos that might resonate more with you.